G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Tantanoola Tigers. Today, I'm reading a couple of old newspaper reports about the Marulan tiger, big cat, thylacine or thylacoleo sightings near Goulburn in 1903. So we'll get into it. This first article was published in Sydney's Evening News on Wednesday, the 25th of February 1903, titled The Marulan Tiger. Marulan, Tuesday. A report that a tiger is at large in the vicinity of Marulan has caused some sensation. The school teacher from Canyon Lee was attacked by the animal on Sunday night as he was riding from town on horseback when 6 miles out. The horse was severely scratched and the teacher is suffering from shock. John Felt, settler, reports having seen an animal supposed to be a tiger on Saturday while out shooting. The animal was lying down in the scrub 4 miles from town. Search parties have observed traces of the beast, but have so far failed to capture it. The end. Okay, so this next article was published in the Goulburn Evening Penny Post on Thursday, the 5th of March, 1903, titled The Marulan Tiger. When it was first reported that a tiger had been seen in the vicinity of Marulan, very little notice was taken, as most people thought it was only a delusion or something after the type of the hairy man that was seen in Marulan a few years ago. About 3 weeks ago, some boys, sons of Mr. J. O'Neill of Spring Ponds, while out rabbiting about a quarter of a mile from the Spring Ponds homestead, came suddenly across a large animal, which they thought at first was a large dog, lying under the shade of a tree. But on approaching, they were startled by the large size of the brute and its peculiar growl. They at once beat us a hasty retreat. One of the boys, who was carrying a rifle, returned to fire, and according to the boy's story, he would have drilled daylight through the monster had not his rifle become choked in the second attempt. As there was no tiger reported to be at large at the time, there was no further notice taken of the boy's story. But now there is very reason to believe that they dropped on some large animal. The end. Okay, so this next article was published in the Albury Banner and Wodonga Express on Friday, the 13th of March, 1903, titled The Marulan Tiger. Mr. A.J. Buttsworth, public school teacher at Canyon Lee, is reported to have written the following account of adventures with the tiger recently near Marulan. The tiger was first seen about 4 miles from Marulan by a very reliable man named Felt on Saturday, February 26th. He was out rabbit shooting and was within 25 yards of the animal before seeing it. The tiger was lying in the head of a fallen tree, watching the man intently. But as the shooter only had a shotgun, he wisely declined the battle. Covering the beast with his gun, the man cautiously backed away for some distance and then bolted for home. It was then dusk, so he waited until morning, and then, gathering his neighbours, about 8, they searched all day on Sunday, but without result. I was spending Sunday with some friends beyond Marulan, and on arriving back in town about 8 p.m, was told of a tiger, and advised not to go home that night, as I would have to pass near where the beast had been seen. I laughed at the whole affair, and remarked that perhaps the man imagined he saw a tiger, believing the whole thing to be a delusion. I set out my journey in a happy mood, having 12 miles to go. It was all thick bush, and I only got halfway when my horse, who had been jogging along easily, all of a sudden gave a tremendous snort and bounded across the road. At the same moment, the tiger, which must have been crouching behind a bush, came bounding at me with gaping mouth, and with eyes which glared like bullseye lanterns. He made about 4 bounds, growling fiercely all the time, and before I could scarcely realise my position, let alone gather up my reins, the horse was at a mad gallop down the road. About 150 yards ahead was a big swinging gate, where my road branched off at right angles to the main one. In my endeavours to pull up, the horse slithered the full length of the gate on his haunches and cannoned into the far gate post. He was up again in an instant and breasting the gate sent it flying. I looked back and could see the flaming eyes of the tiger, and although feeling pretty certain he had given up the chase, yet my hair was up and my blood cold, for I suppose both my horse and self had mild panic. So off I set down the road, for I had not guaranteed that the brute would not change his mind and come after me. Another 200 yards and a small creek had to be crossed. On reaching the bottom, down we went into the bed of loose sand. On recovering, the wild chase from a supposed pursuer was renewed. For a mile or two, the road was now a bush bridle track, and the way we made the dem libs fly and the stumps and logs rattle must have struck terror into the hearts of every bush creature for miles around. I got one nasty knock on the shoulder, and the old horse lost several pieces of skin. 3 miles from the scene, I struck a neighbour's house, and when I related my adventure to the occupants, were much scared, and 2 men who lived a mile away would not budge until they got horses to ride and a gun apiece. I stayed at the house all night, and next morning visited the spot where my mishap occurred. There were tracks as plain as could be, where the tiger had crouched, and the footprints on the road where he had bounded towards me. On the gate post, I found a bunch of hair my horse had left behind, also traces of his slide. These, together with my tracks in the creek, convinced my companions of the truth of my story. On Monday, I had to attend school, but a dozen residents, mounted and armed, made a successful search for his lordship. On Tuesday, a second search was made, but also fruitless. On Tuesday afternoon, the tiger was again seen 5 miles from Marulan, in another direction, so a mounted party was organised for Thursday. Men attending from all round to the number of 43, whilst the second party of 8 was also out. Both parties were unsuccessful, but a couple of sheep were found ripped open and choice parts were devoured, this being a characteristic habit. On Saturday, another party made a fruitless search, and now the general belief is that the intruder has gone into the impenetrable gullies which leads towards the Shoalhaven. Of course, many discredited the whole affair, especially as the search parties were unsuccessful. But the scrub is so thick that any animal could be within a few yards and then get away unseen. Many of the schools round have scarcely a pupil left, and I'm afraid the scare will not vanish in a hurry. People do not venture out at night, and all carry firearms, ranging from the venerable Black Bess to the latest repeaters. In fact, the whole place is in a state of terror. The end. Okay, so this is the final article, and this was printed in the Bowral Free Press on Wednesday, the 18th of March, 1903, titled The Marulan Tiger. The Evening News says that the Marulan tiger, about which so much has been recounted of late, is in reality a young leopard, which an officer had brought back with him from South Africa, and which has escaped from its master's control, subsequently amusing itself by chasing peaceable citizens and otherwise harrowing the feelings of the people of Marulan. The owner, with visions of a huge bill of expenses for moral and intellectual damage, is lying very low and keeps on saying nothing. He hopes nobody ever saw him with the leopard in his possession and is now studying the law on the subject. This is said to be the explanation of the Marulan mystery. As a set-off to this, it is reported that the Marulan tiger has been seen in Curranduli and Bungangaw, and that he has killed several sheep. This must be surely be possessed of the fleetness of the wind. Reports from time to time have been circulated of existence in this district. One day it was killing sheep near Mossvale, while, with the swiftness of the thought, it had crossed the country and was climbing the rugged hills near Belmore Falls. No sooner were residents aware of this fact than we were listening to a thrilling tale of adventure near Mittagong, in which the tiger had been laid low by a few shots from a breech loader. There is evidently more myth than reality to this tiger incident. The end. Well, that's pretty interesting. I love to know what they're seeing, because it was first seen by John Felt, who was out shooting, and but they said but when his story came out, some boys, sons of Mr. J. O'Neill, were out shooting 3 weeks earlier, but they obviously never said anything. And they came across a large animal, which they thought was a large dog, which is a really interesting way to describe it. And they said that they couldn't believe how large it was, and it had a peculiar growl. And then, so John Felt's out rabbit shooting, and then he's come within 25 yards of the animal before he saw it. And he said it was lying in the head of a falling tree, and it was watching him intently. And he had a shotgun, but he decided not to have a shot at it, and he backed off away. And then the school teacher, the next day, or the day after, the school teacher, Mr. A.J. Buttsworth, he was told of the tiger and not to head home at 8 p.m, and he laughed it off. He thought, oh, yeah, you're all idiots and you're joking. And then so he's riding along in the bush, and all of a sudden this tiger's jumped out from behind a bush at him with a gaping mouth, and he said its eyes were like bullseye lanterns. It made 4 bounds at him, growling fiercely all the time, and his horse took off at a mad gallop down the road. The horse was so scared that it cannoned into the gatepost and was up again in an instant. And you can see the flaming eyes of the tiger coming after him, and it took a few chunks out of the horse as well. And then he told people that he went to a house nearby after all this happened, and he told them about it, and they're like, he's staying at the house there that night, he's not going nowhere, and they were all scared as, and people wouldn't leave their houses or anything. And it's just really interesting what it was. And then the final story says that a young leopard, which an officer brought back with him from South Africa, which would have been the Boer War that he was fighting in by the date, that's quite possible that someone lost a leopard, and that was what was the Marulan tiger running around. But the thing that gets me with all these stories, no one has given a really good description other than saying it's a tiger. No one has mentioned stripes. No one has mentioned spots. And the thing that gets me, if it was a leopard, why wouldn't you say it was a leopard? Because if it's got spots, you'd say it was a leopard. If it's got stripes, you'd say it's a tiger. And if it had none, you'd probably say it was a lion. So it's interesting what they're seeing, whether they're seeing a leopard, a Bengal tiger, a thylacine, or a thylacoleo, or even something else altogether. All very interesting stuff, and I'll get back to you all next time. Okay, bye.